I want you to imagine finding out that the man you've loved for 17 years, the man who held your hand through 2 miscarriages and danced with you in the kitchen on Tuesday mornings, is planning a romantic evening with someone else. Now imagine that you found out because he left his email open on the iPad you share, the one sitting on the kitchen counter next to the grocery list you've been updating. That's how my world ended on a Thursday afternoon in October, with the smell of pumpkin bread baking in the oven and my husband's careful planning laid out in digital ink for me to see. I'm Sarah. I'm 43 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was the woman who packed lunches with little notes inside. I was the wife who still reached for her husband's hand during movies. I was the woman who believed that love, real love, could weather anything if you just kept showing up. But standing there in my kitchen, reading an email thread between my husband David and someone named Jennifer Calloway, I realized I'd been showing up to a marriage that had already left without me. Before you hear what I did next, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching this from, because what I'm about to share is going to sound impossible, maybe even unhinged, but I promise you every word is true. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart, you're going to understand exactly why I did what I did. Make sure you check the description box below for more stories like this, because you're not going to believe where this goes. The email wasn't even hidden. That's what made it worse somehow. It was just sitting there in his inbox, a confirmation from Romano's Bistro, the most expensive Italian restaurant in our city, the kind of place we'd only been to twice in our entire marriage, both times for major anniversaries. The reservation was for Friday night, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, table for 2. The name on the reservation was David Preston, my husband's name, but the email chain below it told a different story entirely. "Can't wait for tomorrow night," she'd written 3 days ago. "I've been thinking about you all week." His response made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped the iPad. "I've already planned everything. Wear that blue dress I like. This is going to be special, I promise." The blue dress he liked. He'd noticed what she wore. He'd made promises to her. He'd planned something special, the way he used to plan things for me back when we were young and everything felt possible. I scrolled up, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears, and found months of messages. Months. They'd been seeing each other since July, since the company picnic where David's firm had rented out the park and I'd stayed home with a migraine. She worked in his office, in accounting, and her messages were full of inside jokes and references I didn't understand, mentions of lunch breaks and late meetings, and a whole secret life my husband had been living right under my nose. I sat down on the kitchen floor, right there on the cold tile, and I let myself break. I cried the way you cry when you can't breathe right, when your chest feels like it's caving in and every sob hurts coming out. I'd given this man 17 years. I'd given him my 20s and 30s. I'd given him my trust and my body and my dreams, and he'd taken all of it and handed it to someone else like it meant nothing. But here's the thing about breaking. Sometimes it clears away everything soft and leaves only the sharp parts behind. After 20 minutes on that kitchen floor, after I'd cried until my throat was raw and my face was swollen, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, burning like acid in my chest, but underneath it was something colder, something harder. If David thought he could just walk away from our marriage into the arms of Jennifer from accounting without consequences, he was about to learn exactly who he'd married. I picked myself up off the floor. I washed my face with cold water until the redness faded from my eyes. I took the pumpkin bread out of the oven before it burned. And then I went to work. First, I needed to know everything. I forwarded his email thread to my own account, then deleted the sent message from his folder, so he'd never know. Then I went through his phone while he was in the shower that evening, my hand steady now, my mind clear and focused. I found text messages, photos, restaurant receipts he'd hidden in a folder labeled work expenses. She was pretty in a conventional way, blonde and athletic, younger than me by maybe 10 years. In the photos they looked happy, relaxed, the way David and I used to look in our own pictures before life got complicated and busy and routine. I found the restaurant reservation details in his photos, a screenshot he'd taken probably to remember the time and date. Romano's Bistro, Friday at 8, table 14. He'd even added a note to himself, request corner table more private. That's when the idea came to me, fully formed and perfect, like it had been waiting there all along for me to be ready to see it. If David wanted privacy for his romantic evening, I was going to give him exactly the opposite. But I wasn't going to show up alone and make a scene like some scorned wife in a bad movie. No, I was going to do something so much better, something that would make him understand exactly what betrayal felt like. Jennifer Calloway was married. I'd found her Facebook profile within 10 minutes, and there he was in half her photos, a tall man with kind eyes named Richard Calloway, a high school history teacher who posted pictures of his students' projects and wrote long captions about why he loved his job. They had 2 kids, both girls, still in elementary school. In their family photos, they looked happy. Jennifer smiled at the camera while Richard looked at her, and the girls made silly faces, and it all looked so normal, so real. Richard Calloway had no idea his wife was planning to wear a blue dress to Romano's Bistro tomorrow night while he probably stayed home with their daughters, trusting her completely the way I'd trusted David. I sat there looking at Richard's face on my laptop screen, and I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to tell him the truth. And then, if he was willing, I was going to ask him to help me with something that would make both of our cheating spouses remember this night for the rest of their lives. I know what you're thinking. I know this sounds crazy, maybe even cruel. But if you've ever been in this position, if you've ever had someone you loved rip your heart out and act like it was nothing, then you understand that sometimes the only way to survive is to take back your power in whatever way you can. And I was about to take back mine in a way nobody would see coming. Finding Richard Calloway's personal email took me 2 hours and 3 different internet searches, but by midnight Thursday I had it. I sat in our home office with David asleep upstairs, the house dark and quiet around me, and I wrote the hardest email I'd ever composed. Dear Richard, I started. You don't know me, but my name is Sarah Preston, and I need to tell you something that's going to hurt. Your wife Jennifer is having an affair with my husband David. Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, they have a reservation at Romano's Bistro. I found months of messages between them, and I think you deserve to know the truth. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. I'm sorry for both of us. I included screenshots of everything. The emails, the text messages, the photos. I didn't hold anything back because I knew if I were him, I'd want proof, not just accusations. Then I added one more paragraph, the one that made my hands shake as I typed it. I know this is a lot to process, and I understand if you just want to confront her privately. But I have an idea if you're interested. What if we showed them exactly how it feels to be blindsided? I've secured the table right next to theirs, table 15. If you want to join me, if you want them to see what they've done reflected back at them, reply to this email. No pressure. I'll understand either way. But I think they deserve to understand that their choices have consequences. I pressed send before I could second-guess myself, then sat there staring at the screen, wondering if I had just made a terrible mistake. What if Richard forwarded this to Jennifer? What if he confronted her tonight and ruined everything? What if he thought I was insane and reported me to someone, though I wasn't sure who you'd even report something like this to? I didn't have to wonder long. At 1:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Richard Calloway had written back. Sarah, his email said, I just spent the last hour reading everything you sent and trying to figure out if this is real. My wife told me she has a work dinner tomorrow night, some kind of team-building thing at a nice restaurant downtown. She said it would run late. She asked me to put the girls to bed without her. I believed her because I've never had a reason not to. I'm sitting here looking at pictures of her with your husband, and I feel like I don't know anything anymore. Yes, I want to join you. I want her to see my face when she realizes she's been caught. I want to watch her try to explain this. Tell me when and where to meet you. I read his email 3 times, feeling something I hadn't felt in days, solidarity. This man I'd never met understood exactly what I was going through because he was going through it too. We were both collateral damage in our spouse's selfish choices, and now we were going to stand together and make sure those choices came with a price. If you're someone who's ever been betrayed, take a second right now and hit that subscribe button because you need to hear how this ends. This is the kind of story you'll want to come back to, the kind you'll want to share with anyone who needs to know they're not alone in their pain. Check the description box for more stories exactly like this one, stories about real people taking back their power. I responded to Richard immediately, giving him the details. Romano's Bistro, 7:45, which would put us there 15 minutes before David and Jennifer arrived. I told him to dress nice, like he was going on a date, and to meet me outside so we could walk in together. I sent him a photo of myself so he'd recognize me. He sent one back, and I studied his face in the dim light of my laptop screen, this stranger who was about to become my partner in the most surreal evening of my life. I'm 41 years old, his next email said. I've been married to Jennifer for 12 years. We met when I was student teaching, and she was working at the school district office. She was funny and ambitious, and she made me feel like I could do anything. We have 2 daughters who think their mother hung the moon. I don't know how I'm going to explain this to them. I don't even know if our marriage can survive this. But tomorrow night, I need her to see what she's risking. I need her to understand that she can't just destroy our family and act like it doesn't matter. I wrote back and told him I understood, that I'd been with David since I was 26, that we tried for years to have children and it never happened, and somewhere along the way I think he started to resent me for it, though he never said it out loud. I told him about all the little ways David had pulled away over the past year, the late nights at work, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the way he'd stopped really looking at me when we talked. All the signs I'd ignored because I didn't want to believe my marriage was ending. Richard and I emailed back and forth until almost 3 in the morning, and somewhere in those exchanges, we became something more than strangers. We became witnesses to each other's pain. We became proof that we both deserved better than what our spouses had given us. Friday morning came too fast and too slow all at once. David woke up cheerful, humming in the shower, and I made him breakfast like I did every morning, scrambling eggs and pouring coffee, pretending everything was normal. He kissed my cheek on his way out the door, and I wondered if he felt anything at all, guilt, shame, second thoughts. But his eyes were bright with anticipation, and I knew he was already thinking about tonight, about Jennifer in her blue dress, about the romantic evening he'd planned with someone else's wife. Have a good day, I told him, and he smiled at me like I was a roommate he was fond of, someone convenient and familiar but not particularly important. You too, babe, he said, and then he was gone. I spent the day getting ready with a care I hadn't taken in years. I went to the salon and had my hair done, long dark waves that made me feel like myself again. I got my nails done in deep red. I went to the mall and bought a dress I couldn't afford, something black and elegant that fit me like it was made for my body. I bought new shoes with heels that made me 3 inches taller. I looked at myself in the dressing room mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, this polished, powerful version of myself that I'd buried under years of being taken for granted. At 6 o'clock, I texted David. Going to dinner with Amy might be late. Amy was my college roommate who lived 2 states away, someone David never bothered to keep up with, a perfect alibi he'd never question. He texted back, "Okay, cool, have fun." Cool. Have fun. Those were the words my husband sent me as he prepared to take another woman to the most romantic restaurant in the city on the night I was planning to detonate our entire life. I met Richard outside Romano's Bistro at exactly 7:45. He looked different from his photos, more tired around the eyes, more uncertain. He was wearing a dark suit and looked like he was heading to a funeral, which I suppose in a way we both were. The funeral of our marriages, of our trust, of the people we used to be before we knew what betrayal tasted like. "Sarah," he said, and I nodded. "Richard, thank you for doing this." "I'm not sure what I'm doing," he admitted. "Part of me thinks this is crazy. Part of me thinks I should have just confronted her at home. But another part of me needs to see her face when she realizes she's been caught. I need to watch her scramble to explain herself. Does that make me a bad person?" "If it does, then we're both bad people," I said. "Come on, let's go show them what they've done." We walked into Romano's Bistro together, and the hostess greeted us with a professional smile. I gave her my name, the reservation I'd made yesterday for 2 at table 15, right next to table 14 where my husband would soon be sitting with his mistress. The hostess led us through the restaurant, past the bar, past the main dining room, to the corner section where the lighting was low and romantic and intimate. Table 14 sat empty, waiting. Table 15, just inches away, separated by nothing but air and broken vows, was ours. Richard and I sat down. We ordered wine we wouldn't drink. We opened our menus and pretended to read them while my heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I thought everyone in the restaurant could hear it. And then, At exactly 8 o'clock, I saw David walk through the door with Jennifer Calloway on his arm, both of them glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from thinking you're getting away with something. They were headed straight toward us, and they had no idea their entire world was about to implode. I watched them walk toward us like I was watching a movie, like none of this was really happening to me. David had his hand on the small of Jennifer's back, guiding her through the restaurant with a possessiveness I hadn't seen him show me in years. She was wearing the blue dress, just like he'd asked, something fitted and expensive-looking that showed off her figure. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and she was laughing at something he'd said, her face turned up toward his with an intimacy that made my stomach clench. They were maybe 10 feet away when David's eyes swept over our section of the restaurant in that casual way people do when they're taking in their surroundings. I saw the exact moment he recognized me. His whole body went rigid. His face drained of color so fast I thought he might actually pass out. His hand dropped from Jennifer's back like she'd burned him. Jennifer noticed his reaction and followed his gaze straight to me. For a second, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Her smile faltered but didn't disappear completely. She looked confused, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then her eyes moved to Richard sitting across from me, and I watched recognition flood her features. I watched her face go through every emotion at once: shock, fear, guilt, panic. "Sarah!" David's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. What are you doing here?" I took a sip of my wine, my hand steady now, my voice calm. "Having dinner. This is Richard, by the way. Jennifer's husband. Richard, this is David, my husband of 17 years, and Jennifer, the woman he's been sleeping with since July." The hostess had stopped a few feet behind them, waiting to seat them, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding in front of her. Other diners were starting to notice the tension, the way David and Jennifer had frozen in place like animals caught in headlights. Richard stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud. He looked at his wife with an expression that broke my heart. Betrayal mixed with disbelief, mixed with this terrible, desperate hope that maybe this was all some kind of misunderstanding. "Jen!" His voice cracked on her name. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Tell me Sarah's got this all wrong." Jennifer opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. I'd never seen anyone look so completely trapped, so utterly caught with nowhere to run. Her eyes darted between Richard and David, like she was looking for a way out that didn't exist. "I can explain," she finally managed, which might be the most useless sentence in the English language when you've been caught red-handed with someone else's husband. "Explain." Richard's voice got louder. Several tables around us had stopped eating now, watching our scene unfold with the horrified fascination people have for other people's disasters. "You told me you had a work dinner tonight. You asked me to put our daughters to bed without you. And instead you're here, dressed like that, with him." He pointed at David, who still hadn't moved, who looked like he was trying to figure out if he could just run out of the restaurant and pretend this never happened. "David," I said quietly, and my husband's eyes snapped to mine. "Come sit down. You made a reservation, remember? Table 14. It's right here. You wanted privacy. You wanted romance. You wanted it to be special. Well, here we are. All of us. Together. Isn't this special? If you've stuck with me this far, if you're feeling what I felt in that moment, that mix of vindication and heartbreak and raw power, leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in my place. And make sure you're subscribed, because you need to hear what happened next. Check the description for more stories like this, stories about people who refuse to be victims. The hostess, finally catching on that something was very wrong, quietly disappeared. A manager appeared instead, hovering at a distance but close enough to intervene if things got physical. David looked at him, looked at me, looked at Jennifer, who was now crying silently, tears streaming down her face and ruining her careful makeup. "Sarah, please," David said, and there was actual fear in his voice now. "Let's go outside. Let's talk about this somewhere private." "Private," I repeated, and I heard the edge in my own voice, sharp as glass. "You mean like all those private lunches you had with Jennifer? All those private text messages? All those private promises you made to her while I was at home being your wife?" Jennifer found her voice finally, though it came out thin and desperate. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. It just happened. We worked together and we became friends, and then it became something more, and I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't know how to stop it? Richard repeated slowly, like he was hearing the words but couldn't process their meaning. You're my wife. You're the mother of my children. How do you not know how to stop having an affair? How do you not know that you're destroying our family? David finally moved, taking a step toward me with his hands up like he was approaching something dangerous. Sarah, I know you're hurt. I know I messed up. But doing this, humiliating us in public, this isn't you. This isn't how we handle things. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping back, and I looked at this man I'd loved for 17 years, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Saw someone selfish and weak, and so small compared to who I believed he was. You're right, I said, my voice shaking now with fury I could no longer contain. This isn't me. The old me would have cried at home alone. The old me would have let you come back from your romantic dinner and act like everything was fine. The old me would have pretended not to notice all the signs because I was too scared to face the truth. But you killed that version of me, David. You killed her when you decided someone else was worth more than our marriage, worth more than 17 years of my life, worth more than every promise you ever made to me. I grabbed my purse, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Richard was still staring at Jennifer like he'd never seen her before, and maybe he hadn't. Maybe we'd both been married to strangers this whole time and just didn't know it. I want a divorce, I said, the words coming out clear and final. I want you out of the house by Sunday. I want you to know that what you did to me, what you threw away for whatever this is, I gestured at Jennifer, was the biggest mistake of your life. And I hope she was worth it, David. I really do. Because you're not just losing me. You're losing every good thing about yourself that I used to reflect back to you. I walked past them toward the exit, my head high even though my eyes were burning with unshed tears. Richard followed me, leaving his wife and my husband standing there in the middle of the restaurant, their perfect romantic evening destroyed, their secret exposed, their choices laid bare for everyone to see. We made it outside before I started shaking, so hard my legs wouldn't hold me. Richard caught my arm, steadied me, and we stood there on the sidewalk outside Romano's bistro while the November wind cut through my expensive dress, and my whole body trembled with adrenaline and rage and grief. Did we do the right thing? Richard asked quietly, and I heard the doubt in his voice, the fear that maybe we just made everything worse. I thought about David's face when he saw me. I thought about Jennifer's tears. I thought about how they'd planned this evening so carefully, how they'd thought they could just keep living their secret life while Richard and I stayed ignorant and convenient and out of the way. Yes, I said firmly. We did the right thing. They deserve to know what it feels like to be caught. They deserve to understand that their actions have consequences. And we deserve to take back our power instead of letting them make fools of us. Richard nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone. I need to call my sister, ask her to stay with the girls tonight. I can't go home yet. I can't face them until I figure out what I'm going to tell them about their mother. I don't have anywhere to go either, I admitted. I told David to be out by Sunday, but that means I have to go home eventually, and I don't know if I can walk into that house and see his things everywhere and remember what we used to be. We stood there together, two broken people on a sidewalk, and for a moment the absurdity of it all hit me. 24 hours ago, I'd been baking pumpkin bread in my kitchen, thinking my biggest problem was what to make for dinner. Now I was standing outside a restaurant where I'd just destroyed my marriage in the most public way possible, and I was doing it next to a stranger who somehow understood me better than my own husband ever had. Buy you a drink? Richard asked, and there was something almost like humor in his voice, dark and painful but real. I looked at this man who'd driven across town to help me ambush our cheating spouses, who'd stood beside me when I needed someone to stand with, who'd lost just as much as I had tonight. Yeah, I said. I think we both need one. What I didn't know then, what neither of us could have predicted, was that walking away from that restaurant wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning of understanding exactly how deep the betrayal went, and how much further I'd have to fall before I could start climbing back up. Richard and I ended up at a dive bar 6 blocks from Romano's, the kind of place that was dark and anonymous, and full of people who had their own problems and wouldn't notice ours. We sat in a corner booth with whiskey neither of us particularly wanted, and we talked for 3 hours straight about everything and nothing, about our marriages and our childhoods, and how we'd ended up here, in this moment, in this disaster we never saw coming. Jennifer wanted to wait to have kids, Richard told me somewhere around his second drink. She was focused on her career, climbing the ladder, making more money. I understood that. I supported it. We had the girls when she was ready, and I thought we were happy. I thought she was happy. But maybe she was just biding her time. Maybe I was never enough for her and I was too stupid to see it. I shook my head. Don't do that to yourself. Don't make their cheating about your inadequacies. They're the ones who made vows and broke them. They're the ones who lied and snuck around and destroyed what we built with them. That's on them, not us. Is it though? Richard looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Because I keep wondering what I missed. What signs I ignored. What I should have done differently to make her want to stay faithful. I understood exactly what he meant because I'd been asking myself the same question since Thursday afternoon. Had I been too comfortable? Too boring? Had I let myself go? Had I stopped making David feel special? Was this my fault for not being enough? But sitting there in that dive bar, watching Richard torture himself with the same questions, I realized something important. Something that would take me months to fully understand but started right there in that moment. They didn't cheat because we weren't enough, I said slowly, working it out as I spoke. They cheated because they're people who are capable of cheating. Because they're selfish. Because they wanted something new and exciting, and they didn't care enough about us or our marriages to say no to temptation. That's not about us being inadequate. That's about them being weak. Richard was quiet for a long time, turning his glass in his hands. Then he said, "My daughters are going to hate me." "Why would they hate you?" "Because I'm going to leave their mother. I can't stay married to her after this. I can't look at her every day and wonder if she's still talking to him, still thinking about him. I can't live like that. But when I file for divorce, when our family splits apart, they're going to blame me. They're going to think I didn't try hard enough to save it." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "They're going to understand eventually. Maybe not now. Maybe not for years. But eventually they'll be old enough to understand that marriage takes two people showing up every day and choosing each other, and their mother stopped choosing." We left the bar after midnight. Richard walked me to my car, and we stood there in the cold parking lot looking at each other, two people who'd met 24 hours ago and now shared something most people never share with anyone, the complete destruction of everything they thought they knew about their lives. "Thank you," Richard said, "for telling me, for giving me the chance to confront her instead of just letting this keep going behind my back. I hate what happened tonight, but I'd hate even more to find out 6 months from now, a year from now, to waste more time on someone who is already gone." "Thank you for coming with me," I replied, "for making me feel less alone in this, for standing beside me when I needed someone to stand with." He hugged me then, and it wasn't romantic or inappropriate. It was just two broken people holding each other up for a moment before they had to go back to their separate disasters and figure out how to keep breathing through the pain. I drove home at 1 a.m, and David's car wasn't in the driveway. I didn't know where he'd gone after we left Romano's, and I realized I didn't care. I walked into our house, our shared space that we'd built together over 17 years, and it felt like a museum of a life that didn't exist anymore. There were our wedding photos on the wall. There was the couch we'd picked out together. There was the kitchen where I'd baked him 1,000 meals, where I'd kissed him good morning 10,000 times, where I'd found the email that ended everything. I sat down on that kitchen floor again, in the same spot where I'd cried on Thursday, and I waited to fall apart. But the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt something else, a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. I'd spent 17 years making my world smaller to fit inside David's needs and wants and schedule. I'd spent 17 years being the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the woman who never complained when he worked late or went on business trips or slowly stopped seeing me as anything other than a fixture in his life. I'd been so busy being what he needed that I'd forgotten to be what I needed. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "We need to talk. I'm staying at Jennifer's tonight, but we have to figure this out." I read it 3 times, each time feeling a little less hurt and a little more free. He was staying at Jennifer's. He'd already made his choice, and he'd made it months ago. Everything else was just details. I texted back. "Lawyer. Monday. That's all we need to figure out." 3 days later, David did come home to pack his things. He tried to talk to me, tried to explain himself, said he never meant for it to happen this way, that he still cared about me, that maybe we could work it out. I listened to him try to rewrite history, try to make his betrayal into something inevitable and blameless, and I realized I was looking at a man I'd never really known at all. "Did you ever love me?" I asked him when he finally ran out of words. He looked surprised by the question. "Of course I did. I do." "No," I said quietly. "You loved what I did for you. You loved having someone to come home to, someone who made your life easier, someone who asked for nothing and gave everything. But you never loved me. Not really. Because if you'd loved me, you couldn't have done this." He left that afternoon with 3 suitcases and a lot of weak apologies, and I watched him drive away and felt nothing but relief. Richard texted me a week later. He'd filed for divorce. Jennifer was fighting it, saying she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to work it out, but Richard was done. He'd seen who she really was, and he couldn't unsee it. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Some days better than others," I told him honestly. "Some days I'm angry. Some days I'm sad. Some days I look around my empty house and feel so free I could fly." "I get that," he wrote back. "The girls are struggling. They don't understand why their mother and I can't just fix it. They're too young to know that some things can't be fixed, that some betrayals are permanent. But I'm trying to show them that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival." The divorce took 6 months. David and Jennifer didn't last 3. Whatever fantasy they'd been living in at Romano's Bistro that night couldn't survive the reality of destroyed marriages, split assets, and the social fallout of being known as cheaters in a town where everyone talks. Jennifer tried to apologize to me once, sent me a long email about how she never meant to hurt me, how she got caught up in something she couldn't control, how she hoped I could forgive her someday. I deleted it without responding. I didn't know her forgiveness. I didn't know her anything at all. Richard and I stayed in touch. Not constantly, not even frequently, but we'd check in every few weeks. 2 people who'd gone through something traumatic together and understood each other in a way most people never would. He was dating again, careful and slow. His daughters were adjusting, spending weekends with their mother, and learning that families come in different shapes now. I wasn't dating. I was too busy falling in love with my own life, with the space and silence and freedom to be exactly who I wanted to be without worrying about making anyone else happy. I went back to school to finish the degree I'd abandoned when David and I got serious. I started painting again, something I'd loved when I was young but given up because there was never enough time. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, places David never wanted to go. 1 year after that night at Romano's Bistro, I ran into Jennifer at the grocery store. She saw me first, and I watched her face cycle through emotions, guilt, shame, fear. She looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. She turned to walk away, but something made me call out to her. "Jennifer!" She stopped, turned back slowly. "Sarah! Hi! I'm not going to make a scene," I told her. "I just want you to know something. What you and David did to Richard and me was cruel and selfish, and it nearly destroyed us both. But it also freed us. It showed us that we've been settling for marriages that weren't working, that weren't giving us what we deserved. So in a weird way, I should thank you. You blew up my life, but you also gave me permission to build a new one." She stared at me, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said. And then I walked away, leaving her standing there with her apologies and her guilt, and I felt lighter than I'd felt in years. I'm 44 now. I live in a smaller house that's entirely mine, decorated exactly how I want it, full of paintings I've made and books I'm reading and plants I'm learning not to kill. I have a life that belongs to me and nobody else, and some days that still feels like the most radical thing in the world. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did that night at Romano's Bistro. If I regret the public confrontation, the dramatic scene, the way I dragged our private pain into the light for everyone to see. And the answer is no. Not for a second. Because that night wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about refusing to be invisible anymore. It was about saying out loud that I mattered, that my pain mattered, that you don't get to destroy someone's life and walk away without consequences. David tried to reach out a few months ago. He sent me a message on social media saying he'd been thinking about me, that he hoped I was doing well, that he'd made mistakes but he'd learned from them. I looked at that message for a long time, remembering the man I'd loved, the marriage I'd mourned, the woman I used to be who would have read meaning into those words and hope into that outreach. Then I blocked him. Because I didn't need his thoughts or his apologies or his belated understanding that he'd thrown away something valuable. I'd already grieved what we were. I'd already buried that version of my life. And I was too busy living this one to dig up old graves. Richard got remarried last month. He sent me a photo from the wedding, and he looked genuinely happy in a way I never saw in any of his pictures with Jennifer. His new wife is a fellow teacher, someone who loves his daughters and makes him laugh, someone who shows up for him the way he shows up for her. We don't talk much anymore, and that's okay. We were each other's lifeboats in a storm, but we were never meant to be each other's destinations. We were just two people who helped each other survive the worst thing that ever happened to us. And that's enough. That's everything. I dated someone briefly earlier this year, a nice man I met at an art gallery opening. It didn't work out, and I wasn't devastated. I was just fine, because I've learned something important in this year of rebuilding myself. I don't need someone else to complete me. I don't need a relationship to validate my existence. I spent 17 years believing that being chosen by someone else was the most important thing I could achieve, and it turns out that choosing myself matters more. There are still hard days. Days when I remember what it felt like to trust someone completely, to believe in forever, to think I knew exactly how my life would unfold. Days when I scroll past couples on social media and feel that familiar ache of wanting to be part of something bigger than myself. Days when I wonder if I'll ever let anyone that close again, if I'll ever be able to trust someone with my whole heart after learning how completely a heart can be broken. But then I remember who I was before. I remember the woman who made herself smaller, who swallowed her own needs, who measured her worth by how well she could anticipate and fulfill someone else's expectations. I remember how it felt to be taken for granted, to be invisible in my own marriage, to be so deeply unseen that my husband could build an entire relationship with someone else, and I didn't notice until it was too late. And I know I will never be that woman again. I teach a painting class, now at the community center on Thursday evenings. Most of my students are older women, retired or widowed or divorced, women who are learning to fill their time with things that bring them joy instead of things that serve others. We paint landscapes and still lives and abstract pieces that don't have to mean anything except what we want them to mean. And sometimes, when someone is struggling with their canvas, frustrated that it's not turning out the way they envisioned, I tell them what I've learned. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from destruction, from taking what broke you and making it into something new. Last week, one of my students, a woman named Patricia, who's been divorced for 3 years, asked me how I knew when I was ready to start living again after my marriage ended. You don't know, I told her honestly. You just start. You get up one morning, and you do one small thing that's just for you. You buy yourself flowers, you take a different route to work, you say no to something you don't want to do. And then you do it again the next day. And slowly, day by day, choice by choice, you build a life that feels like yours. Not the life you thought you'd have, not the life you were supposed to have, but a life that fits you, that honors you, that makes you feel alive again. She cried a little, and I held her hand, and I thought about that night at Romano's Bistro, about the woman I was then compared to the woman I am now, about how destruction and creation are sometimes the same thing, how ending something can be the only way to begin something else. If you've made it to the end of a story, if you've stayed with me through every painful, messy, complicated moment, I want you to know something. Whatever you're going through, whatever betrayal you're surviving, whatever ending you're facing, you're stronger than you think. You're more resilient than you know. And the life waiting for you on the other side of your pain is bigger and brighter and more yours than anything you've left behind. I got the table right next to my cheating husband's romantic date, and I showed up with her husband, and we blew up both of our marriages in the most spectacular way possible. And I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because that night, in that restaurant, I stopped being a victim and started being a woman who knew her worth. I stopped waiting for someone else to choose me and started choosing myself. And that made all the difference. Before you go, I need you to do something for me. Check the description box below for more stories like this one, stories about real people facing impossible situations and finding the strength to survive them. Stories about betrayal and resilience and the messy, complicated process of rebuilding yourself when everything falls apart. Subscribe so you don't miss them, because we're all in this together, all of us trying to figure out how to keep going when the world we knew falls apart. And if my story helped you feel less alone in your pain, if it gave you even a moment of strength or clarity or hope, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the truth is, we save each other. We survive together. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is tell your story so someone else knows they're not the only one fighting their way back to themselves. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that you deserve better, because you do. We all do. And sometimes, the only way to find better is to blow up everything that's keeping you small and start building something new from the ashes.